bows and arrows and complex symbolic displays, 48,000 years ago in the South Asian tropics. Abstract. Archaeologists contend that it was our aptitude for symbolic, technological, and social behaviors that was central to Homo sapiens rapidly expanding across the majority of Earth's continents during the Late Pleistocene. This expansion included movement into extreme environments and appears to have resulted in the displacement of numerous, archaic human populations across the Old World. Tropical rainforests are thought to have been particularly challenging and, until recently, impenetrable by early H. sapiens. Here, we describe evidence for bow and arrow hunting toolkits alongside a complex symbolic repertoire from 48,000 years before present at the Sri Lankan site of Fa-Hien Lena, the earliest bow and arrow technology outside of Africa. As one of the oldest H. sapiens rainforest sites outside of Africa, this exceptional assemblage provides the first detailed insights into how our species met the extreme adaptive challenges that were encountered in Asia during global expansion. Introduction. South Asia, and Sri Lanka more specifically, has emerged as a particularly important region for understanding how our species managed to successfully colonize a wide variety of environments among a backdrop of changing climates and interhominine contacts. As early as the 1980s, it was proposed that microlith technologies alongside bone technologies and ochre use appeared in Sri Lanka earlier than they did in Europe. Despite these suggestions, and the recognized importance of the region for human evolutionary studies, detailed studies of the material culture recovered from its most ancient sites have thus far been lacking, particularly with regard to postulated personal ornaments, potential projectile technologies, and other forms of material culture that provide insight into how human societies negotiated the South Asian tropics during the Late Pleistocene. It is only recently that multidisciplinary excavation of long, well-dated cave and rock shelter sequences is enabling these questions to be investigated and the findings to be compared to records from more customarily discussed regions. As the site of the earliest fossil appearance of Homo sapiens in South Asia, Fa-Hien Lena Cave in southwestern Sri Lanka is a crucial locale for understanding the adaptive capacities and cultural flexibility that humans required as they first moved throughout the diverse environments of Asia. Ongoing analysis of the site has already found that it holds the earliest microlith assemblage in the region and attests to targeted hunting of prime-aged semi-arboreal and arboreal monkeys and squirrels. Here, we present evidence for the earliest use of bow and arrow technology outside of Africa, a unique tradition using innovative Osseous-based arrowheads. Also described is a diverse toolkit of bone and tooth tools indicating the manufacture of plant minus and slash or hide-based items that may represent some of the earliest clothing or nets in a tropical setting. Alongside a complex array of symbolic artifacts, this record stretching from c. 48 Ka thousand years through to c. 4 Ka BP before present, results on the basis of stratigraphy and dating. 4 distinct phases of occupation have been identified at Fa-Hien Lena. Phase D contains evidence for late Pleistocene occupation of the cave from c. 48 Ka to 34 Ka Cal. BP and probably involved several episodes of occupation, each of which may have been relatively short-lived. Phase C spans the Terminal Pleistocene occupation from c. 13 Ka to 12 Ka Cal. BP, while phases B and A span the early 8.7 Ka to 8 Ka Cal. BP and middle 6 Ka to 4 Ka Cal. BP Holocene, respectively. One radiocarbon date falls outside these phases, 29,120 to 27,870 Caloi. BP and may represent a short-lived episode of human presence within the cave. Osseous hunting technologies. Analysis of the recovered faunal remains determined that the osseous tools to be described below were made on site. Blanks, unfinished tools, and waste pieces were identified in each of the 4 phases, with broken fragments of finished artifacts, along with several points displaying cut marks consistent with those produced during retooling activities, suggesting that maintenance of weapons was also regularly practiced. Of the artifacts made on terrestrial bone, 130 are consistent in size, morphology, weight, and use, wherewith having served as projectile points. flaked and ground into shape. 3 broad categories of point were identified: unit points, n equals 24, 18.4%, bipoints n equals 18, 13.8%, and geometrics n equals 2, 1.5%, with the majority of the collection made up by fragments exhibiting both manufacturing traces and impact fractures. Though not complete enough to determine the original form, n equals 86, 66.1%. Unit points exhibit notches on their left and / or right sides around their midline, indicating fixed hafting using ligatures. Similar notching attributable to hafting measures was also observed on a number of the bipoints, while others, such as the geometrics, show no signs of having been fixed to a shaft. Decoration or grooves for holding poison were only found on a single point fig. 2c. All points are made on Cercopithecid long bone projectile points and scrapers from Fa-Hien Lena, and geometric bipoints, with coming from phase D context 146. Hilted bipoint, red arrows indicate cut notches. Hilted unit points. Red arrows and red circle indicate wear, indicating fixed hafting. Symmetrical bipoints. The hafting and launch mode for the bone points are determined through the combined consideration of the form of the point, size, weight, and proximal morphology. Use wear, hafting and impact, and comparison to ethnographic observations of arboreal mammal hunting. Before the introduction of the shotgun, bows and arrows and blowguns were the weapons of choice for hunting monkeys in South America, Asia, and Africa. 1216. Both these technologies require small, light points, with the only difference being that arrow tips were fixed hafted to a lightweight shaft, while blowgunning requires a long and exceptionally light dart to be fletched with an equally lightweight stuffing to create a seal within the blowgun. These technologies are made from plant and / or osseous materials, the choice of species being dependent on what is available in the environment. Lossing the points with poison is also a common feature. Of note here, the use of bones from hunted monkeys to produce projectile points has been recorded in recent times. We can rule out the use of the Fa-Hien Lena unit points and the larger bipoints as blowgun darts, as they are morphologically unsuitable for this launch mode, being too short, too heavy, and having being hafted. Instead, they display design and use wear for fixed, hafting notches, shoulders, and wear to proximal edge to a thin, less than 1 cm thick shaft, as inferred by proximal width of the point's median, 3.5 mm. Furthermore, the dominance of distal, mesial fragments within the recovered assemblage is consistent with osseous, projectile point collections. They also commonly display step-terminating bending fractures and spin-offs to their distal extremity. Damage considered to be diagnostic impact fractures, for brittle solids. While differentiating between arrow and spear points on use wear alone is currently untenable. The size of the Fa-Hien Lena points is too small for a single pointed spear, and, while consistent with those that would tip a multi-pronged spear, this weapon would be ineffective for the environment and prey present in this context, as closed forest environments do not allow for the lengthy arced trajectory that these weapons typically require. Thus, the small size, lightweight, fixed hafting, presence of hunting, consistent impact fractures on distal extremities, assemblage composition, and ethnographic analogies combine to indicate that the bow and arrow was in use at Fa-Hien Lena from, at least 48 to 34 kcal. BP. The use of the bow and arrow is further supported by the fact that the zooarchaeological prey mortality profiles based on dental eruption and wear suggest that prime-aged adult monkeys were targeted. This projectile technology allowed for the deliberate targeting of specific individuals. In contrast, the use of traps in the capture of semi-arboreal taxa usually results in mortality profiles similar to those in natural populations. The geometrics, on the other hand, do not display clear evidence for fixed hafting and may represent fishing gorges similar to those found in later Stone Age African and late Holocene East Coast Australian contexts. Fish remains were found in all phases of Fa-Hien Lena, with 2 families Silurids catfish and Cyprinids carp identified. Ethno-ichthyological studies from Sri Lanka show that these fish are caught using a variety of techniques, including the use of ichthyotoxic plants, spearing, line fishing, and the use of cane baskets and nets. Alternatively, these small, carefully shaped points could have functioned as barbs within snares or net. And Cercopithecid bone peg or lissoir, see antler blank. D and Cercopithecid canine awls or knives. E. Flaked munjuk muller, G. and Cercopithecid bone pegs or awls, I. Servid metapodial wedge. Plant minus and slash or skin working technologies. An additional 29 bone implements display morphologies and wear, consistent with use as awls, pegs, wedges, and lissoir tools associated with the working of skins and slash or plant fibers. Traditionally, discussion of the origin and development of clothing has been tied to the need to protect the body from the cold. However, the Sri Lankan evidence suggests that clothing development may represent another technology that could be molded to suit the circumstances in this case, perhaps as a layer of protection from insect-borne disease. The 3 modified flake Cercopithecid canines fit comfortably into this skin/plant working techno-complex, as does a single barking deer Muntiacus munjuk muller that has been flaked to accentuate the sharp-tip fig. 3. A final find that supports the working of animal skins and slash or plant fibers at Fa-Hien Lena is a carefully shaped bone ellipse from phase A fig. 4. Each side is marked with regularly spaced lithic cut notches, 19 on the left and 10 on the right fig. 4. Several very shallow cut marks are also visible down each edge. The tip has accrued extensive rounding and polish with a large chip taken out of one face, while the base has been snapped in antiquity. The size, shape, and use-wear of the piece could suggest use as a shuttle or mesh, stick/gauge for constructing nets. 32. The even spacing of the notches down each side of the piece could coincide with the spacing of knots and loops. 33. And as nets are exceptionally useful in catching both arboreal and aquatic resources, would be perfectly suited to the Sri Lankan environment. Alternatively, it may represent a decorated spatula, though it would be too thin for practical use. And possible decorated spatula, shuttle, or lissoir in bone, marine shell beads in C2E conus SPP. And F and Nasser Riyad, ochre beads H to K and O and used oil yellow, red, and mica colorants. Symbolic and social technologies. Evidence for symbolic and slash or social behaviors include 3 marine shell beads, 2 made from the apex of conus SPP. Phases D and fig. 4, C2E and 1 from a mud snail Nasser Riyad phase C, fig. 4. Each displays a single perforation and extensive wear rounding, polishing, and keyholing from use fig. 4, D and F. This rounding and polish is so extensive that all signs of flaking and slash or grinding from the reduction of the shell into a disc form are completely absent. The preference for white, bright, shiny, and round qualities in the shells, selected for beads, is therefore similar at this Sri Lankan site to what is observed at other H. sapiens sites of similar age. No economic marine shell or any marine fish bones with the exception of several shark teeth were found at the site, indicating that either the people who used Fa-Hien Lena visited the coast to collect these materials or had contact with groups living on the coast. Given that stable carbon and oxygen isotope information from human tooth enamel at the nearby site of Lena implies year-round, tropical forest foraging. Trading between groups focusing on different ecologies seems more probable. Completely unique to the site are 3 large beads made entirely of red ochre nodules. One found in phase B 8.7 to 8 Cal. BP and 2 with missing provenance from excavations before 2010, Fig. 4, H, J, and O. Unlike the 136 other fragments of yellow, red, and mica colorants that exhibit striations from grinding and scraping to produce powdered pigment, only one of the beads shows any sign of grinding or scraping of its surface. Fig. 4. Instead, all 3 have been perforated with C3 mm holes, the edges of which show signs of stringing. Fig. 4I. The higher surfaces of each ochre bead exhibit extensive rounding and polish, indicating that they have rubbed against a soft surface, such as skin or hide. As far as we are aware, no other ochre beads have been reported for any other Pleistocene or early Holocene aged contexts anywhere in the world. Instead, more durable beads such as those made in shell or bone have been found colored with pigment, either incidentally transfer from the body/clothing or deliberately. At Fa-Hien Lena, no traces of colorants were observed on the shell beads, possibly owing to the fact that they were recovered during wet sieving and later washed. Silver mica pigments are the dominant colorant in the assemblage, followed by dark to bright reds, and then bright yellow. Mica nodules are exceptionally small in most cases, averaging just over 1 centimeter in maximum dimension. The 31.5 specimen shown in Fig. 4N was the largest colorant piece recovered and displays significant grinding and rubbing facets. If mica was available in large nodules, as this example indicates, the small finds then suggest that this type of pigment was regularly reduced to near exhaustion. Materials and methods. The bone tools and artifacts analyzed in this study were selected from the faunal assemblages recovered during the 2009 to 2012 excavations of Fa-Hien Lena. In addition to looking at finished osseous artifacts, we also looked at anthropic modifications on faunal remains, e.g., cut marks, grinding, and deliberate breakage, and the results were presented in detail by Wedage et al. All artifacts were examined using a Zeiss STEMI 508 stereo microscope fitted with an Axiocom 105 camera. Metrics were obtained using Mitutoyo CD6CX digital calipers, whose metal arms were coated with a thin plastic layer to protect the artifacts from scratches. Identification of manufacture and use traces was based on previous examinations of osseous, marine shell, and colorant assemblages. To date, a total of 30 radiocarbon dates are available for Fa-Hien Lena 4-6, allowing for a detailed phasing for the site. We also revised the site's stratigraphy. Details of the site chronology and phasing are presented in the supplementary materials. To find out about Sri Lanka's buried past, subscribe my channel. Thank you.